Hey everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. It is Monday. Dan Labbe with Mary Kay Cabot. A Hey Mary Kay edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast with questions from our football insider subscribers, cleveland.com/Browns. The blue banner at the top of the page to get involved with that. It is rookie minicamp week. So Mary Kay, we are going to get a look this week for the first time at the entire Browns rookie class, undrafted free agents, tryout players. Of course, that means Shedeur Sanders, Dillon Gabriel, Mason Graham, the running backs from all these guys. We're going to get to put eyeballs on all of these players beginning on Friday. We'll be out there on Friday and Saturday. Camp is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So this is kind of this is always a little bit of a weird week because you see these guys sort of isolated with a bunch of other rookies, and then a few weeks later we get to see them with the veterans, and it can be a little jarring sometimes when you see them lined up against veterans all of a sudden. But this is kind of the start for us. These are the first practices we get to watch this year.
Yeah, it's time for some football already. And here we go again. It is May. I don't know how all of a sudden the calendar turns over to May and you're in football activity again, with OTAs starting this month and rookie minicamp coming up this weekend. It blows my mind. I feel like I was just at the Super Bowl. I really do. I feel like I was just at the Senior Bowl and the Super Bowl and trying to get all of that stuff straight. And now here we are in May, heading off to actually watching guys throwing the football, catching the football, and practicing this weekend. Not the full practice, of course, no contact or anything like that, but we will get to see some football activity, and it's pretty exciting.
Okay, well, let's get to it. Obviously, a lot of people wanting to talk about these quarterbacks and Shedeur Sanders and all of that. And let's just start with this question from Mavro and Cbus. The Browns, of course, with 4 quarterbacks on the roster. We'll see 2 of them this weekend. Mavro and Cbus, hey, Mary Kay, do you believe the Browns will start the season with 4 quarterbacks on the active roster? And if not, who goes?
Well, they absolutely could start the season with 4 quarterbacks on the active roster, so that they can try to trade one. So 4 might make that initial 53 at cutdown day, but that doesn't necessarily mean that 4 will be kept on the active roster as they move forward after that. But certainly they might end up keeping 4 so that they can try to trade one. And that's what they tried to do last year. They were trying to trade Tyler Huntley, and they were trying to trade potentially Jameis Winston. If someone would have come calling for Jameis and offered them something that they couldn't refuse, they would have traded Jameis, because at that point, Dorian had tied him for the backup job. So yes, there is a world in which they can have 4 to begin with, but only so that they can try to move one. There's no way that they're going to keep 4 quarterbacks on the roster for any length of time, and certainly not for the season. So they will have some decisions to make. And I'm guessing that one of them, at least one of them, will either be cut or traded. And it's just a matter of how this whole competition shakes out over the summer and starting out in the spring.
Doesn't it feel a little bit like, and look, I don't want to start cutting guys here on May 5th, but doesn't it feel a little bit like, honestly, anything could be on the table with as far as how this room shakes out? Like, and they aren't really tied to any of these guys in any significant way. Even, Dillon Gabriel was a 3rd round pick, which is pretty significant. But other than that, I mean, even Kenny Pickett, they just traded a 5th and DTR for him. Joe Flacco is a pretty low number. Shedeur Sanders was a 5th round pick. Just on the surface, they're not really tied to any of these guys in any meaningful way, which also makes that scenario interesting.
It really does. And we have talked about this also on this podcast before and in our videos, that I haven't even completely 100% ruled out another veteran coming in here in the event something unexpected happens. Now, they don't want to give up a bunch of money and a bunch of assets for a Kirk Cousins. But if for some reason they can get their hands on Kirk Cousins for not a lot of draft capital and not a lot of money, then there is a world where that could possibly still happen too. It's unlikely. Let me say that it is probably very unlikely at this point, but nothing can be ruled out, and anything like that can change on a dime depending on what a team decides to do. So that's something to keep just back there on the back burner. But I do think that we just don't know how this is going to shake out yet. I think most Browns fans assume that Joe Flacco is going to be on this team and probably going to be starting. And I've tried so hard to let people know that it really might not go that way at all. I think that Kenny Pickett will start out spring practices in the lead with the inside track to try to win the starting job. And then another way that I put it was they went hard after Dillon Gabriel in this draft. They didn't go hard after Shedeur. They passed up Shedeur 6 times in this draft. So if you were looking at those two, you would have to definitely put Dillon ahead of Shedeur. And then Joe Flacco, it's not that he was a complete afterthought, but he was signed pretty late in the process. And he's 40 years old. So I'm putting Kenny ahead of him. I think right now, if I had to kind of rank them, I would go Kenny at this moment, not the way that it's going to shake out, but heading in, I'd go Kenny, Dillon, and then maybe Joe and Shedeur, probably Joe first and Shedeur last, just with the way that it all went over the past couple of months. So that's how I'm viewing it right now. And now it's going to be up to these guys to jumble that up and shake that up.
Yeah, I don't think that ranking is too far off. And I think as you were talking about that, what's what makes this strange, I think, and what makes it hard maybe for some Browns fans to wrap their heads around is just starting with Joe Flacco, right? We know what he means to this fan base from what he did in 2023. So he's kind of got this outsized like meaning to Browns fans. And then Shedeur is like a bona fide celebrity. Like he is, everybody knows Shedeur Sanders. He's on social media everywhere, posting videos, all that. Like he is a legitimate celebrity. And those are the two guys that are kind of probably at the bottom of the pecking order right now, which is just sort of strange to think about, but it's true. Like the two most popular guys in that quarterback room might be the two guys at the bottom of the pecking order. Again, on May 5th, we're a long ways from actually playing real football.
Right. And I really do believe that it will be up to them to change the landscape of the quarterback room. Do you think that Joe Flacco is going to want to stay down there at number 3 or number 4 when he is heading into his 18th season and he's 40 years old and he has forgotten more football than most of these young guys will ever know? No, he's going to fight like heck. He's extremely competitive and he's going to go out there and he's going to fight for it. And same thing with Shedeur. He believes that he is a starting quarterback in the NFL. So I think the competition is going to bring out the best in all of these guys. But I do think it's going to be let the best man win. And some of it is going to be how do they connect with the receivers on the team? How do they connect with the tight ends? Because the bottom line in this whole thing, as we know, is to score points and win games. And that's what they have to do. So it doesn't matter what your arm strength looks like necessarily. It doesn't matter how tall you are. It doesn't matter how fast you can run. What matters is that you can move the chains and get the ball into the end zone and score points. That's what they have to do this year. They were last in the NFL with 15.2 points per game. The other thing that you have to prove that you're not going to do is turn the ball over. The Browns want good, clean football this year. They're going to run the ball a lot more. We know they've overhauled their whole entire running game. They're going to run the ball a lot, but what they want to go with that is clean football. They're not going to tolerate the interceptions that they got last year. And that's basically what Joe has been known for, is throwing too many interceptions. And he does take a lot of chances, and sometimes the payoff is big, but there's no way Kevin Stefanski is going to tolerate a lot of interceptions. Whenever they talk about Kenny Pickett, they talk about the fact that he doesn't throw a lot of interceptions, that he doesn't turn the ball over very much. Joe, on the other hand, in his last, I think, 4 starts in Indianapolis, turned it over 6 times or something like that. It was a ton. We talked about that stat the last time we were on here, and it might have even been his last 3 starts that he turned the ball over like 6 times. We'll have to go back and look that up. But it was a lot. And that is what they are trying to avoid this season. They don't want that. And then with Shedeur, and I wrote about this in a column that I wrote that posted yesterday, is he just takes too many negative plays. And that's certainly what they don't want. They don't want negative plays and they don't want turnovers. So that's what those two guys have got to cut down on, Joe and Shedeur. Shedeur's negative plays, of course, came in the form of way too many sacks, 94 in his last two seasons at Colorado. That was an FBS high, way too many. So he's got to make quicker decisions. He's got to get the ball out quicker. He's got to use his checkdowns. He's got to study film. He has to know exactly what is going on out there, and he's got to see it. And he can't be drifting backwards because that is not going to fly. He was able to get away with that at Colorado. He's not going to get away with that in the pros. And I think that more so than anything caused him to drop in the draft. Just those negative plays and the inability to make up for them necessarily at this level is, I think, why he ended up tumbling all the way to the 5th round where the Browns traded up to get him at 144. So those are some of the things to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and there were a couple. I mean, there were some picks at Colorado, some interceptions he threw at Colorado, where you were like, "Oh, I don't know what he was looking at there." So, yeah, I mean, I think he's got a ways to go to be that guy. And again, to go back to the other point you were making, kind of about Dillon and Shedeur. One's a 3rd round pick, one is a 5th round pick. I still think it's significant that the very first move the Browns made this offseason was to trade for Kenny Pickett. And, I can't imagine there were teams just beating down Philadelphia's door to make that trade. I'm sure if the Browns would have wanted to wait for a week or a few days or something, maybe they could have. But the fact that they made that move, it was the first move they made. It was kicked off their whole offseason. I think that's worth keeping in mind too. And again, unlike with Joe Flacco, they did give up a real asset. Was it something huge? No, but it was a 5th round pick. It was DTR. Like it wasn't nothing. And so I think all of that matters when we talk about these guys and sort of trying to figure out how the Browns view them. That one they traded for as their first move of the offseason, and another one they used a 3rd round pick on for a team with a lot of needs and a team that could have gotten, another really good skill player or an offensive lineman or anything else there at number 94. They chose Dillon Gabriel.
Right. I think that says a lot when you look at how they went after those two guys, how they pursued them, how they knew for weeks that they really liked Dillon Gabriel and that they were probably going to take him or try to take him in this draft. And as you mentioned with Kenny Pickett, all you had to do was listen to the way they talked about him at the NFL owners meetings and other places that we've talked to them. They rave about Kenny Pickett and his upside. And it's not that he has shown the world what he can do yet, but they believe there's more there than has met the eye so far. They really do believe that Kenny Pickett can be someone who can come in here with a good supporting cast, with a good quarterback-friendly system, which is what Kevin Stefanski runs, and it is going to get back to running even more so this year, that he can flourish and even exceed what he has done so far. That's what they're hoping for, that maybe, just maybe, they can strike that kind of Sam Darnold lightning in a bottle with Kenny Pickett.
Okay, let's get to a question here. I think we're going to get a lot of questions like this over the next few months. This one comes from Pat Flynn in Lakewood, Colorado. Hey, Mary Kay, how long will it take for Kevin Stefanski to name a QB1? Will he want to establish a starter early with lots of ramping up time since he's taking back play calling duties? Or will the competition last through all the preseason games or before preseason games? I know it's hard to forecast, but just curious.
Well, I think it's going to be important for Kevin Stefanski to establish his starter early on. They have to be able to hit the ground running for the opener. They have to be ready to go. They can't be messing around with dividing up reps, 25, 25, 25, 25, all training camp. They can't be doing that. They have to get their starter ready to play. So I think by the time they get through the offseason program and the mandatory minicamp in June, I think they should have a pretty good idea of who's going into camp as their starting quarterback. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be written in stone at that point, but I think they have to go in with a pretty good idea of who they think is going to be the starter on opening day and give that guy as many reps as they possibly can if they want to get this offense rolling. I mean, my goodness, it was horrible last year, and they just can't afford to go 3, 4 games into the season with it looking bad again. So I think they've got to name their guy, at least have their guy in their own mind as they head into training camp at the end of July. And then if someone comes from behind and wins the job, then that's another story. But they have to know by then.
Yeah, and I think just the more I've thought about it, this idea of having these four quarterbacks, like I just don't at some point, and it might be soon, there's not enough reps to go around. They're at least meaningful reps. And we know that once you get into training camp, you got to have your starter going with the ones. Or, if you're having a real competition, maybe you have two guys, right, that they're getting opportunities with the ones. But, your number one guy and your number two guy eat up a lot of those reps. And then your number three and number four kind of just get what's left over. And then, of course, we know when you get to the season, good luck getting any reps if you're not the starting quarterback. So it's, I do think this idea of you're just going to have four guys taking equal reps when we get to the end of July just doesn't seem realistic. There's only so many of these things, and you've got to get ready to play real football games. And you can't do that if, you're giving Shedeur the same amount of reps as Kenny Pickett if you believe that Kenny Pickett's going to be your starting quarterback. So I think this is going to move fairly quickly, because you just don't have endless amounts of reps to go around, especially the really valuable first team reps in like 11 on 11. There just aren't enough of those for four guys.
No, and then the other part of that is the fact that you have got to get that chemistry going. This is a brand new offense. It's a brand new offensive coordinator. It's a brand new offensive line coach. It's basically a return to the Kevin Stefanski way of doing things after trying to completely change it up and overhaul it last year and go the spread route. So you're going back to basics, basically. But what they need to have is some chemistry going on between their quarterback and their skill players. They have to have that. They are overhauling the running game, so that's all going to be new. You've got to get that timing down. So you really don't want to be messing around too much with your first team chemistry. You have to have those guys working really well together by the time you get to the opener. So I certainly don't think that you can afford to do an open competition for very long into training camp, if at all. So definitely, I mean, you're going to have Kenny Pickett. If it's Kenny, Kenny's got to get his mojo down with Jerry Jeudy. Now they've been working together in the offseason, so I think that's going to help him. He already has some familiarity with Diontae Johnson, who was signed just today, formally agreed to his 1-year contract last week. And then said Tillman missed a lot of time last year, 6 games with a concussion. You've got to get him back on track. So these are all things that they have to have taken care of before the opener, and it takes time.
So you mentioned a name there. Let's take a little detour here and let's talk a little Diontae Johnson, because I think people are curious, like why the Browns decided to make that move, why they decided to do it now. It happened in the same week that Elijah Moore signed with the Buffalo Bills. His contract, I think, became official today or yesterday. So the Diontae Johnson signing, obviously last year was a very difficult year for him. He couldn't really stick anywhere and ultimately kind of bounced around a bunch of places. Bunch of teams said thanks, no thanks to him ultimately. So why did the Browns, at least do you think at this point, decide that they want to take a chance on Diontae Johnson?
Well, one of the first things is that the price is right. He comes at a bargain basement price, so that's for starters right there. And then I think the other thing is that they're basically just taking a flyer on a player who is getting almost like a last chance to see what he can do with the football team. And maybe they're trying to get him in hopes of catching him humbled and maybe a little bit desperate to stick with a team after what happened last year. So they better get the best version. And I mean, I'm working on a column about this. They better get the best version of Diontae Johnson, or Diontae Johnson could be finding himself looking on being on the outside of the NFL looking in. It's to that point with him now. So he's got to come in here and he's got to prove himself. He's got to prove that he's ready and willing to buy into the program and to accept his role, whatever that may be. And if he can do that, then the Browns just might be onto something.
Yeah, it seems like a low enough risk signing, and like we've talked about this is a team that is not going to go to the Super Bowl this year. They can sort of afford to take some chances with a guy like this. So it was a little weird, but I understand kind of what they're doing. This is a guy that has talent. I mean, he was really good in Pittsburgh for a few years there, but it. I think it caught a lot of Browns fans off guard, especially because it came out of a draft where they obviously didn't land a receiver. I think some people were hoping maybe they would land one, but they really used the draft to kind of shore up their run game. Add a guy like Harold Fannin. They kind of went all in on kind of showing us what this offense is going to look like. And now, you bring in a Diontae Johnson. We'll see what kind of impact it has, and even how long he's here. Like, he's going to have to prove it.
Yeah, he might not last. He might not make it through training camp. He might not make it to the opener or even the first couple games of the season. And as we've seen with his recent history, he hasn't been able to make it stick. So it's up to him now. It's up to him to decide if he wants to continue his NFL career or not. The Browns are throwing him a lifeline in the same way that they threw Shedeur Sanders a lifeline and saying, we're giving you a shot. Now it's up to you to see what you can do with it.
Okay, this question comes from Christian Nicholas in Hudson, and I think Kevin got asked about this after they drafted Dillon Gabriel, but it's interesting. Hey, Mary Kay, how difficult do you think it will be for the offensive line to change protections when the lefty Dillon Gabriel plays and the right tackle becomes, in essence, the left tackle? And I know, Mary Kay, you are just happy to have another lefty in the building, just for that reason alone.
That's right. And the funny part about this is that it has flown under the radar a little bit that he is a lefty. It really isn't something that is talked about all that much. It didn't seem to hurt him very much in college. He played for 3 different football teams at a very, very high level. He threw 155 touchdown passes in his 63 starts. The 63 starts are an FBS record. The 155 touchdown passes tie Case Keenum for number 1 in the FBS. So it certainly didn't hurt him in that way. And I do think it is maybe a little bit of a shift in terms of the blocking and the protection. But we've so often heard the Browns say that in their minds, it doesn't matter who's starting at right, who's starting at right tackle, who's starting at left tackle. They believe that those 2 spots are equally important. And I think that will have to be the case with a lefty at quarterback. So we'll have to see how it goes. I do think that it's a little bit different, but they're basically downplaying it and they're not making too much of a big deal about it at all.
I like it. I think, like, listen, there aren't enough lefty quarterbacks anymore. I feel like the lefty quarterback was going by the wayside, but now we're seeing a little bit of a resurgence. I did find what Kevin said when he was asked if you're playing a lefty, does that change anything? And he said, no, the ball spirals a little bit differently, but there's been plenty of examples of guys that have done it at a high level. I do think that the ball spinning is interesting because I do remember an interview. I believe it was Jerry Rice. I know it was one of the San Francisco receivers, and I think it was Jerry Rice, where he was talking about Joe Montana, and then they go to Steve Young, and the ball, it was different. Like, it was different catching the ball from a lefty than a righty just because it spins differently, and he had to really kind of get used to that and work on that and get used to it coming out of, like, how it felt just to catch that football.
Well, yes, I think that's going to be something that will be very interesting. But these receivers this season, they're not only are they going to have to try to adjust to a right spin versus a lefty spin, but they're going to have Joe Flacco's arm and Kenny Pickett's arm and Dillon Gabriel's arm and Shedeur Sanders' arm, because while they are going through this quarterback competition, these guys are going to have to learn how to catch the ball from all 4 of these quarterbacks. So they're going to have to be on point. And we always hear receivers say, it's up to me to catch the ball. It doesn't matter if they throw a catchable ball or not. I have to catch the ball. Now, of course, we all know that throwing a catchable ball is important. It's one of the things that Shedeur Sanders stressed a lot at his Colorado showcase, that he really tries to throw a very catchable ball. And I do think I think it matters. I think it matters because we saw players dropping Dorian Thompson-Robinson's passes left and right. For whatever reason, he struggled to put touch on the ball, or they struggled to adjust to it, or whatever the case may be. But Shedeur prides himself on that. I'm sure Dillon Gabriel does, because somehow he threw 155 touchdown passes. And then Kenny Pickett, he's going to have to make sure that he does the same thing. And then we know that Joe can be extremely productive at this level. So the receivers are going to have to make a lot of adjustments, including to a lefty quarterback.
Yeah, and the timing and all that stuff. It's again, it's none of it's going to be easy if you're dealing with a lot of these quarterbacks. Going back to your point earlier, the faster you can get the guy figured out, so that you can start working on all that stuff, and he can figure out where this guy wants the ball, when he wants all of that stuff, the better. Okay, a story that happened last week that wasn't about Nick Chubb, but it was, of course, Jerome Ford taking a pay cut. You wrote about that it's probably a sign that Nick Chubb is not going to be a Cleveland Brown. So this question comes from Joe in Stowe. Hey, Mary Kay, the Browns look to be a fair to middling team next year. Why the reluctance to sign Nick Chubb? Their record will be average with or without Nick, so why not let him try his comeback at home?
Well, first of all, the door isn't completely slammed shut on Nick Chubb, because things can still change. Someone might want to trade for Jerome Ford or something like that. And then that would open the door back up for Nick Chubb to end up here. But at this moment in time, with them giving this pay cut to Jerome, which was basically almost about a 50% pay cut from 3.4 to $1.75 million, with him taking that pay cut, it really does mean that at this moment in time, they're not re-signing Nick Chubb. They're not. And I know, once again, that is a very tough pill to swallow. And I've been trying to prepare these amazing Browns fans for the inevitability that this could mean the end of the road here for Nick Chubb. It just could. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to see it end like this. Everyone wanted to see Nick Chubb finish his career in a Cleveland Browns uniform. But right now, that's not going to be the case. The only way that this happens, if with Nick Chubb coming back, is if Jerome gets traded or there's an injury on this in this running back core. Other than that, it's time for him to find a new home, and that new home might not come until the beginning of the season when a running back goes down. That's how Kareem Hunt has found his recent jobs. When you get to that point in your career, when you're 29 years old, 30 years old as a running back, a lot of times you have to wait for someone to get hurt before you find that job. And so that's the situation that Nick is in right now. Nobody might be clamoring for him at the moment, but they'll probably be knocking on his door if a running back goes down. And look at how fast Nick Chubb went down in 2023. He was down for the season by the second game of the season. So we have seen what he's able to do in the gym right now, clearing high hurdles with ease at his high school gym, squatting more than 500 pounds. And this is firing him up. He's being told once again that he's being counted out. And it's not sitting well with him at all. That's pretty obvious by the things that he's posting on his social media. So now he's got a lot to prove. He's hungry. He's going to be ready to go. And I think some team is going to get a very, very motivated Nick Chubb when they sign him.
Yeah, and look, I could see how this could look very bad for the Browns if they let him go someplace else. But I just think after this draft, when they take Quinshon Judkins at 36, they take Dylan Sampson, like you're taking those guys to play. You don't draft running backs, especially in the second round, to have them sit and wait. You use those guys as much as you can on those rookie deals. If they're good enough to get a second contract and durable enough, great. But you put the miles on those guys early and often when you draft them that high. So it kind of just comes down to what exactly is Nick's role if he re-signs here. because he's not going to be the starter. He might not even be the number 2 back now with Sampson, and of course Jerome Ford still in the mix. So what is he even going to do when he shows up here unless somebody gets hurt? So it just feels like that ship sailed when they took those 2 running backs. Now they've kind of made this move that shows that they want to keep Jerome Ford around for this last year of his deal. It would be great if Nick Chubb could come back. It would be great if he could come back and rush for 1,200 yards as a Cleveland Brown. But it doesn't make sense after the draft they had. And it kind of goes back to what we've talked about all offseason. This was always going to be about what the offseason looked like as a whole, and the draft was a big component of that. And now that we have a clearer picture, it just doesn't make as much sense to bring back Nick Chubb as it did 2 weeks ago.
No, because when you look at it, what the Browns don't want to do is bring him back as their 4th running back, because their 4th running back generally isn't even going to be active on game day for the most part. The only way you're getting active on game day in that role is if you're playing a role on special teams, which he is not going to do, or if you are a specialist in some way. If you're a third down guy, which he's not, or if you're the goal line guy, which he's not, or the short yardage guy, which he's not. They've got guys now that are going to do that for him. Quinshon Judkins is going to be able to pound it in on the goal line or get that extra yard for you that you need in a short yardage situation. So he doesn't have a niche role. Whereas Dillon Sampson, he can be that third down back. He can be your receiver out of the backfield. He can do a bunch of different things for you, special teams possibly. So there just wasn't going to be that kind of role for Nick Chubb. And who wants to see Nick Chubb on the inactive list week in and week out? Nobody wants that. If he does end up here, which once again, we can't say that he's for sure not coming back here in some way, shape, or form. But if he does come back here, he's not coming back here to be the bell cow. That's Quinshon Judkins. He would be coming back here in a support role. Now, maybe he will have an opportunity to go somewhere else and be the fill-in bell cow for somebody, or the number 2, or the number 3. But they did not want him here on the roster as the number 4 back because of who he is and what he means to this city and this football team.
Yeah, I mean, I think even Browns fans who are just adamant they should bring back Chubb would admit that they wouldn't love it if he was just here and then inactive every Sunday. Like
right.
as much we've all been there when everybody does the Chubb chants and they want him out there. And again, his role would he maybe be relegated to that, like you were saying, that short yardage or goal line situation, I guess, but that was never really his strength to begin. I mean, there were times when almost Kareem Hunt was better in that role than Nick was when it was, down at the 2-yard line, getting the end zone. So it just, unfortunately, it just feels like we've reached a point where it just doesn't make sense for either party for Nick to come back, go somewhere and, you know what, prove the Cleveland Browns wrong. Browns fans are going to love you one way or another, as long as you're not doing it for the Ravens or the Steelers. Browns fans are going to love you regardless. And, if you go prove them wrong, they're not going to be mad at you. They're going to be mad at the front office. But I think this run game is going to be okay without Nick anyway.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to the running backs that they have added to this football team, and if you are watching some of Quinshon Judkins and what he's even doing in the weight room, my goodness, I mean, all you have to do is go look at some of him on film and in the weight room to see what he is about to bring to the table. When you talk about almost like a Derrick Henry-like beast mode guy, that's what Judkins looks to me when he's in the weight room right now. He's got a lot of Nick when it comes to squatting 600 pounds and just being so powerful and cut and just built. He is going to be the kind of AFC North back that the Cleveland Browns need to play their brand of football, the kind that they're getting back to. But on top of all of that, they are bringing back, obviously, their wide zone scheme. They have a new offensive line coach. They're getting back to what they do well. And it's going to be good night, Irene, I think, in the running game between those two and the 1-2 punch that they provide. And even Jerome Ford has tumbled down to the number 3 spot. I mean, you don't cut a guy's pay from 3.4 million to 1.75 if he's getting more work and a bigger role. No, it's going to be the 1-2 punch of Quinshon Judkins and Dillon Sampson. You got your home run hitter, you got your big bruising back. I had said so many times in the pre-draft process, get those two kind of guys. That's what they needed. They needed to completely revitalize their running game. They've done that. And Nick Chubb gave tremendous, wonderful service to this football team. It was a two-way love affair between him and the fans. But now it appears that it's time to move on, thank him for his amazing service, and hope that he goes and finds a great job somewhere else.
Okay, well, I know that's exactly how Browns fans want this pod to end, is us talking about Nick Chubb no longer being a Brown. But that is where we're going to end it. A Hey Mary Kay edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Those questions did come from our Football Insider subscribers, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. If you want to get involved with that, get that newsletter, become a texter, get those exclusive stories, those subscriber exclusive stories at cleveland.com/Browns as well. We're on Instagram, Orange Brown Talk. Twitter is Orange Brown Talk. And of course, our YouTube channel, Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. Mary Kay, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds great.